Ladies and gentlemen, coming soon, a podcast you've all been waiting for. The Movie Podcast to end all movie podcasts. A podcast that discusses and critiques the best of the best and the worst of the worst movies playing at a theater near you. With a host whose opinions have been deemed as fact by your favorite fact checkers. And that's a fact. Without further ado, let me introduce you to the movie maestro, the tyrant of theater, the gumshoe of review, the man that makes theater employees and Hollywood execs shiver by his mere presence. Ladies and gentlemen, the judge, the jury, the sultan of cinema, Justin Henson. Welcome to the Movie Wire.
And welcome to this week's edition of the Movie Wire. I'm your host, Justin Henson, and welcome to the show. We've got a big show this week with 3 brand new reviews, with 2 playing in theaters and 1 now available to stream. And this one you don't want to miss. Then finally, one of the most shocking documentaries you will see right now, about the king of internet trolls and the dangerous outcome of feeding one of these trolls. And the documentary by Peter Ross is Social Media Monster. We've got a lot to cover this week, so let's jump right in. Ready for my verdict? Let's get into it. Prepare to pass through the looking glass, where one man without a job who lives in his car can leverage his phone and free Wi-Fi at McDonald's to tear apart the fabric of people's lives. And he can do it without consequence. And the documentary by Peter Ross is Social Media Monster.
I tried to help a woman who was being beat up by a man. That's how this all started, with me trying to do a good deed.
I do think he's a sadist. I think he enjoys hurting other people. Matt Burdick likes to play the part of the hero. It all pretty much started with the Iheart incident. He wanted to save the damsel in distress. He didn't want to do it, so he went and asked somebody else to go do it for him.
The goal of an internet troll is to elicit a response. I don't think internet troll is the appropriate label necessarily for Matthew Burdick. He seems to have a completely different emotional need than most internet trolls. Burdick seems to have a craving to be loved, and if he doesn't get it, he then goes off on everybody and he wants to be a victim.
The internet was conceived as a way to share information and new ideas. Personally, I use it to share videos of my cats. The original intent of social media began innocently, I'm sure. Pretty quickly, people found ways to lie, cheat, and manipulate. At this point, Matthew Burdick declared war on the city of St. Joseph. Everybody tends to create an avatar of their best life, leaving out the boring parts.
He told me that everything he does is a sort of Hunter S. Thompson or Andy Kaufman style bit. So he's coherent enough to make up a story like that when he thinks there's going to be consequences.
Well, most people do. Making it seem like your life is perfect is very different from catfishing on a dating site or financial fraud. It took no time for the darker side of social media to become evident.
I was doing an investigative journalism research project, and I was going to nuclear facilities.
Well, the first thing I did was look at a map to see where the closest nuclear facility was, to see if he's serious about this, how much danger is he going to present to the people in the community that I have been elected to represent. But you have to take these kinds of threats seriously.
Prepare to pass through the looking glass, where one man without a job and a lot of mysterious money can leverage his phone and free Wi-Fi at Starbucks to tear apart the fabric of people's lives.
Emails just kept coming and coming and coming.
I'd never seen emails like these before.
And while this kept going on and on and on, you could tell that it was building into something.
And he can do it all without consequence.
City officials just completely ignored him.
I don't know how crazy he is. I hope he doesn't hurt himself or anyone else.
I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're going to catch all bad content in our system. We don't check what people say before they say it, and frankly, I don't think society should want us to.
Now, this documentary came to me in an email to give it a watch, and every recommendation and email I get, I actually do watch, but only a handful make it onto the show. This is one out of the many of the independent films that don't get the time of day by studios, and that is a complete shame. Not only that, but Social Media Monster started streaming on Tubi back in May before being yanked from its platform within 24 hours and canceled from Prime Video as well, who both caved into this documentary's main topic, the internet troll of Matthew Burdick, and more likely due to his consistent harassing threats. Which, before I get into the review, I just want to state that shame on these platforms for taking part in the censorship of our culture and expression of vision from independent filmmakers. No matter if the film is good or bad, the intent of why it's not shown when given an appropriate topic should never be censored by a platform because of a fear of an individual. Social Media Monster is not only an important film in today's times, but a well-done, crafted piece of public frustration and accountability to how technology is being utilized, but also begs the question of the long small print of terms and conditions from our social media giants if they've actually read the terms they preach. This documentary by writer-director Peter Ross and a writing credit from Alfie Gonzalez tackle a topic of how technology can be used as a toxic tool for those seeking attention and relevance. Ross uses one man along with his personal experience and some great supporting interviews with a laser focus of balance of evidence and feelings behind each and every topic surrounding our social media monster, Matthew Burdick. Our director, Peter Ross, brilliantly organizes his thoughts to a crescendo of events to go from a simmer to a boiling of the viewer's feelings, with supporting facts from not just social media posts and emails, but uses the silver bullet to a troll, which is using his own content against him to prove his narrative. Matthew Burdick may not be known to many that he hasn't harassed, and Peter Ross knows this, and addresses the viewer to build upon the story of this troll of insanity. In the beginning of the film, Ross sets up the viewer with an incident at an IHOP, without giving too much context in the narrative, but rather allows those that witness the events to tell us what happened. The opening statement by Peter Ross is a well-written one, but takes about 10 or so minutes to mentally adjust to the opening events when the IHOP incident unfolds, to really understand where Ross was going to take us with his narrative. And when we do get the incident at the IHOP, it reminded me of scrolling social media to a Karen video, and the cynical side of me has to watch, and then watch another one, and then another one. Ross lets the footage speak for itself along with those present without adding too much of a narrative of his own. This was a smart way to set up the rest of the documentary, with allowing our main topic of Matthew Burdick introduce himself in what would be a Matthew Burdick way. The opening scene is a fantastic and strategic move by Ross to show almost a male version of Karen. I think the internet calls that Terry. But based on this documentary, I really think the male version of Karen should be Matthew. But that's just my opinion. Ross gives the hook of exactly what sucks us into watching videos on social media back to back. I found myself engulfed from the first 15 minutes on where Ross was going to take me on this journey. This is one of the rare documentaries that crescendos the events to really tap into specific emotions from fear, and not just any fear on just one mere topic, but the fear of one man and the fear of what one man can do to so many lives with no accountability from our tech giants. It paints a picture of the lack of structure and accountability, and at times I do wish that Peter Ross went into more detail of the why. It is addressed to an extent, but this did lead to another emotion that was triggered by this documentary, which is anger. And when anger is present based on Matthew Burdick's actions, human nature is to ask ourselves why. And this is a tricky skill for any filmmaker. When anger is present when watching film, watching these events unfold, and when I hit pause, I had to remind myself that there will never be a satisfying answer to why, because accountability will still not be present. So I can't hold that to this film. In contrary, I applaud it. The mere success of this movie bringing out these emotions from me means that Peter Ross is executing his narrative to what it was intended to do. To do this, it just can't be a mere opinion piece, and Social Media Monster isn't. It brings victims of Matthew Burdick in to tell their story, including Brian J. Myers, a city councilman from St. Joseph, Missouri, to give us his point of view from what was happening in the background in regards to how Matthew Burdick was handled, along with his own experiences. Now, some of the more interesting pieces of this documentary is the original social media footage that Matthew Burdick shot himself. This footage paints a picture of Burdick that only he can do, which is show an example of a self-absorbed, egotistical, and feeds on any sort of attention. And Ross shows great examples of the danger of an online presence when the attention doesn't meet the troll's expectations, which is a behavioral desperation to higher the stakes, from attempts to get people fired, death threats, shootings, to even a threat of blowing up a power plant. These are things that are presented online that bring the frustration of why no accountability. And it brings the fear of what if. What if Matthew Burdick was pushed over the edge? What if he had the confidence to commit these crimes? It's a frightening thought. And in the documentary, each interview brings her own set of opinions. Some are the same, some contrasting, some have different experiences on what kind of person Burdick is. From just a troll, attention-starved, narcissist, even the topic of a mental disorder. Or what City Councilman Brian Myers points out is that he's just a dick. I agree with Brian Myers. I think I spoke this quote by Brian Myers out loud numerous times during the film before he even said it. Wherever your opinion lands on who Matthew Burdick is and why he is the way he is, there's one undeniable fact that there will be an emotion put into this documentary. There will be a temptation to follow along, hoping for a positive outcome. The amount of time and effort Matthew Burdick put into obsessively responding to social media posts, writing threatening emails, posting videos, this amount of dedication, effort, and passion that's targeted for toxicity and negativity could have been redirected to do good or put passion in succeeding at a decent job. But just like any internet troll, they take the human nature to be attracted to negative feelings, and all effort will go into this. It takes one interaction for somebody to water this seed of negativity for it to grow into toxicity, and social media is a greenhouse to grow this behavior. Matthew Burdick took what he felt was the easy route to make everybody else feel as miserable as he is. Social Media Monster is a triumph in the way it goes about telling a series of events that took me 2 views to really appreciate what Peter Ross was trying to do. What I found so special about Ross's strategic vision of how to tell this story of the pain that Matthew Burdick caused all these victims is the fact he held nothing back when it comes to allow Burdick to define himself with his own footage. And Ross, obviously being a better man, shows empathy and even regret to a level to give the viewer a sense of summary, or ease if you will. That Burdick is still floating around, but there is a small sense of closure when Ross closes out this documentary, closing up and summarizing his narrative and what he's feeling at this exact moment. Social Media Monster is a well-thought-out strategic balancing between factual social media posts by Matthew Burdick, interviews of victims, and Burdick's own videos. Peter Ross's visual of how to tell this story is truly what stands out in making this one of the most entertaining, thought-provoking, and a documentary that will bring out not just fear, but anger. And an anger not just for the disgusting Matthew Burdick, but the way social media feeds people like this. By the time the credits roll, Peter Ross leaves you with all the right lingering thoughts of social media. And there's no question that the internet has made life easier. But also, between the lines, Peter Ross asks, is it worth it? And since Social Media Monster has been pulled from selected streaming platforms, I will provide links to how to view this movie for free, including a link to watch it on YouTube. Check the description. The links to this movie will be in the description of this episode. I'm giving Social Media Monster 3.5 stars. And that's a cut on this week's edition of The Movie Wire. I want to thank you for listening and thank you for your support. You can also show support by following me on Instagram, Blue Sky, X, Thread, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Letterboxd at Movie Wire Show. And please don't forget to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And if you haven't yet checked out the Cult-Worthy Cinema Podcast and the Movie Wire's crossover show, Back to the Balcony, make sure you do. Again, the link of that show will be in the description of this episode. Until next week, do me a favor. Make sure you stay for after the credits to show the respect to those that put their blood, sweat, and tears into making a feature film and support your local movie theaters.
A verdict has been made on this episode of The Movie Wire by your host, Justin Henson.